Welcome to a video series, Chess Beginner to Chess Master. What is this video series all about? I'm going to focus on one opening, the Queen's Gambit accepted. We are going to look at so many games ranging, starting off from the 1500 level all the way up to the final game in this video, featuring Magnus Carlsen. We are going from one level all the way up to the world champion. I will be going through so many games. We are going to see the typical positions, the typical mistakes that each level is making. Timestamps are in the description, so if you want to jump around to a certain rating, you can. So first up, we have a 1501 against a 1614. So first up, what is the Queen's Gambit accepted? Every game, we are going to see it from the black side. This video is going to help me a lot because I play the Queen's Gambit accepted. C4, and now you take. White has gambited a pawn. From this, White plans to get the pawn back. Knight out, knight f3, knight c3, e3. In this game, e3 is played, and black now strikes in the center with c5. You get the pawn back, take, now e6. All good so far from both players. Knight f3. Black is controlling d5 square. In these kind of positions, White has something called the isolated pawn, which means there's no pawn nearby to defend it. When this happens, it's a very good strategy to control the square in front of it. So then, your opponent cannot push that pawn forward. Castle. Notice White is actually controlling squares around d5. You're controlling e5 and c5, two central dark squares. And all good so far from black. Bishop out. Another move. Another developing move by White to gain control of a dark square. Knight c6. There are lots of options here for White. The game could continue. Maybe the guy puts the rooks towards the center. Finds a way to tuck the bishop back. Once you go a3 or h3. However, White decided to force things right now. d5. Perhaps the 1500 is not being patient. You can just force things. And the truth is, things can come off. But black is playing an aggressive option with knight a5. And here, White goes wrong by dropping the bishop back, which looks like a normal move, but it just doesn't work. A brilliant move here is actually d6. Now that does hang the bishop, but what's the point of this move? You take it, and now queen d4. The queen in the center attacks the knight. The bishop can come into d6. So if black blunders by playing knight takes, knight b5 is good. The queen attacks the knight, also bishop d6 wins as well. That's why after this move, e5 had to be played, and then lots of things come off. Take. However, in this game, the 1500 blundered by retreating the bishop back. Why do I say this is a blunder? Because it's just a miscounting exercise. When the bishop retreats, we can take, and then we can take. Notice in this position, 1, 2, 3. White also has 1, 2, 3 on d5. But the problem is black removes one of the pieces defending d5. Take, and now take. Take. Black is now up a pawn. Bishop f6. Trade happened. The funny thing is here, White actually has this brilliant move bishop here, and you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal? You attack the rook, then the rook moves. Remember, White is down a pawn. If he can't get that pawn back, he's in trouble. Bishop c7, this is what I mean by a brilliant move. You can't move the rook up because it's mate on the back. All of a sudden, mate on the back. So you move the rook, hit, not there, and then it is a draw. What a strange repetition. Now going back a few moves, back to the game, here, bishop f6 was played. Bishop e6 is better, by the way, but we see that in the game soon. A trade happens, because this bishop is very strong. Maybe he didn't want to play a passive move like rook b1. Trade happens, and now this. It's not the best bishop in the world, but you are up a pawn. Rook e8, and now rook c8. f3, and he's up a pawn, and a really cool move here in my opinion. Oh, by the way, perhaps white was planning to use this monster knight to take, but it doesn't work. Take, and you can't take because it's back rank mate. All of a sudden. So going back a few moves here, after this move, black is now taking over. Brilliant move in my opinion, just moving the bishop out of the way. You can't take because the rook will take the rook. Black is winning. A good strategy is to trade pieces off. Take. Now let's see this endgame. The bishop dominates the knight. That knight cannot come in on a light square. It cannot easily come into the black position. King to the center. Knight plans to come in. Knight might come in, so you play b6. You play f6. Two moves that control dark squares. Along with this, you can see the blue arrows show not only is black controlling dark squares, but the bishop and the other pawn control the light squares. Bishop in. And now lots of pawn moves. Black is slowly making progress. Take. And finding a way through. By the way, I said this before, the bishop totally dominates the knight. Just want to go back a few moves just to show it. It was this position here. Bishop dominates the knight, not allowing the knight to come into the black position. But if we look at this situation, we have the same type of domination. Bishop against knight. It's as if that knight is out of the game. Imagine if you just took the bishop and the knight off the board. It's game over. That pawn will just run home. King up, and now that can go to take g4. Forward, push, game over. They played until mate. Take, game over. King comes in, you can even take. This is a fancy move, by the way. Just totally boxing the king in. And here, just want to show you this really fancy mate because, I mean, anything wins here. You got bishop and a pawn up, but a really cool mate coming up. Check, and then this one. I've never seen this before, that's why I just wanted to show you. Beautiful mate. Now, going back to the game, the guy just played on a few more moves. Here, just want to show you the finish. Run the pawn down, run the pawn, doesn't matter. Give the bishop back, you get a queen. Let's get the queen and the king together, check. You can just get the king in, yeah, professional really. Don't even need to take the pawn here, that's what I mean. Get the king in and then the king in here, game over. Right, so that is the first game, 1500 to 1600 level. Next one, we are rising through the ranks. That's what this video is all about. Stay tuned for the end. We will see Magnus Carlsen using the Queen's Gambit accepted. This game is between an 1846 and a 1912. An aggressive move is where white gets the center fully with e4. e3. Next game, we're going to see e4. Take, and then c5. So this is a little bit different from the first game, but black is setting up knight here, pawn e6, c5 is very important in the Queen's Gambit accepted. I really like the way black has handled this. Now a6. The point of this move is to get space on the queen side with b5. Notice, these two pawns are controlling light squares. That pawn will hit the bishop. That's why in this position, looks like if we look at the red arrows, the bishop can move back to b3. Maybe the knight can come out. However, white chose a nice option, which is just to retreat the bishop back there. So if you go b5, you could attack the pawns, something like this. It's just one way to play. However, bishop here, knight c6, putting pressure on the center. Capture now happens. So totally different from the first game where, imagine if I got something similar here, take. That is what we got in the first game. White had the isolated pawn in the center, but not today. Not in this game between the 1800 and the 1900. White chooses to not give himself the lone pawn. Queen's now come off. In my opinion, this is where the game begins. Sometimes you get this in the Queen's Gambit accepted. In my opinion, I'm totally fine with this because I see it as the game has just begun. Castle, get space, bishop's out. Both sides have fianchettoed their bishop on the queen side. We tend to get this in the Queen's Gambit accepted. Drop the bishop back. No funny business with here. Setting up a tactic. Fair enough. Drop the bishop back. And now knight b1. Really fancy move from the 1800. Didn't expect that, to be honest, but the cool idea is when he gets the bishop in the game. Did he need to do that? No. There's so many moves here. Too many moves. Let's see what happens. Get the far, now knight d2. However, white's rerouting was really fancy, but it does give black this option of knight b4. The game has just begun. Whoever wins this game will be the player who outplays his opponent, just putting their pieces on slightly better squares. Already black's pieces are more active. Knight b4 coming in here, here. White attacks it, and I'm shocked, to be honest, why the knight didn't come in. He actually chose to go back here, which is fine. Knight d3 is good. That knight is so dangerous, we can take it off, and then here we can back it up with the rook. If the knight goes in the center, the rook can just drop back. Maybe the king comes in the center, but black is better because you got two bishops slicing the board. It's really this bishop, to be honest. You're controlling so many light squares your opponent cannot control. So going back a few moves here, kick it away, but it chose to return to the center. Knight f1. And now knight d4. Lots of just knight jumps, but I mean overall more active knights. Beautiful position in my opinion. Typical classic Queen's Gambit accepted position where black is totally fine. Two knights in the center. Two bishops are well placed. You've got your pawns on light squares. Rooks are in the center. King can come in. The game has just begun. I know I keep saying this, but you might get these kind of endgames and you got to play better than your opponent. a4. White tries to force the matter, trying to break open the queen side. Knight c3. It's a blunder because of black's last move. Rook here means black controls the c-file, and now we're in. Knight c3. Game over. All of a sudden. The knight is so dangerous, so take. Game over. You have to take. If you move the rook, then a tactic now falls on the c-file. So even though it's the endgame, we get this tactical option from the 1900. Bishop takes d4. Then we take on e2 next. So we've just grabbed a knight. We're going to grab the bishop with check. That is vital. Check. Let's say you take, and then you take. You are now a rook down. So let's go back a few moves. Back to the game. After this moment, white saw this tactic and therefore had to give up. Chose to give up the rook for the knight. Take. And now a good strategy is when you are totally winning, why give your opponent any chance? Just get rid of their stuff. Take. You take, me take. Look at the number of pieces. We are a rook for a knight up. Game over. We're coming in on the central pawn. Rook back, come back, and now even this cool move, pinning. By the way, there's a fancy move here. You can take, by the way. Take. And here we got this back rank mate problem, which we saw in the first game. Take, and then we are in. Game over. Mate on the back. So going back a few moves here. The game went like this. Black chose to pin. Take. And then the game was up shortly. Let's keep going. King up. Coming in. Let's trade off white's best piece, which is the bishop. Get the bishop back in the game. Bishops come off. Attack the knight. Let's slowly attack the knight. We just run it down, mate. Just run it down. Run it down, and he was being sporting, I guess, just walked into a mate. Easy finish. Just march it home. Get a queen. And game over. Next one. Couple rated players here. 23-45 versus 23-28. Both players rated about 2300. So let's see what happens. we get the same thing, Queen's Gambit accepted, and now we get e4, one of the critical ways to play. So a few ways to react. You can go c5 like we saw in the first game. You can go b5, which is trending nowadays, to defend. Too sharp for me, b5. But knight f6 is a nice one. Encouraging white to push in the center, and now you put the knight in front. Notice we saw this in game 1, where there is an isolated pawn. Few moves here for black. You can get the bishop out, get the knight out. The knight b6 first, which I've played before. You attack the bishop and now you drop it back. Classic opening trap here. You cannot take the pawn because bishop b5 check and you lose your queen. You might want to set this trap up in your own games. It's one of the first opening traps you ever learn. Now going back 2 moves. You hit the bishop, it drops back, so you can't take this pawn. Knight here putting pressure, and knight e2 defending it, rather than this option, because you get this annoying ping. You may be thinking, well, what's the difference? Knight e2, bishop g4, you hit the bishop. Okay, and now we get this kind of position. Just like in the first few games, pawns here, that bishop was out, and it's a little bit different now because that knight was here. So we can see some small differences as we progress through the ranks. See how these players are handling these kind of positions. Bishop e3, you get this clump of pieces, knights defend each other, the bishops are well placed in the center, controlling a lot of space, but black does have control of the d5 square, which we saw in the first game. A lot of control, pressure here, that's going to come out, castle, lots of ways to continue. However, black attacks the bishop, threatening to win it. Bishop here. I mean, it just looks very impressive for black. But black is really controlling the d5 square. It's quite funny. It's quite interesting, I mean. If we look at the second move, this is the square that's now given away from this capture. And if we go back to the position, I mean, that's the square you're fighting for. I mean, you've got full control over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're stopping this pawn advancing as well. Hit the bishop. It just looks, yeah, it looks very interesting. The bishop drops back, offering a trade. Now, do you take with the knight or the bishop? White goes for a knight trade. Another option was h4. That's fascinating. h4, and then just to attack it. I see. Another option, eh? But white chose to take it, and now we get this situation where lots of pawns. 5 pawns on light squares. In order to blunt this bishop. So now we're seeing the high level strategy, you could say, when we look at 2300's play. All pawns are on light squares in order to restrict the bishop your opponent has. Queen e2. Another option was maybe you kick it away. But queen e2 played, now the knight comes back, and now we've thrown this check. Bishop here, we're good. But after bishop retreats, queen h4 check. You can trade queens. You can move the king. But in this game, g3 was played. Fascinating move. Notice a couple of moves ago, the h file was open. You can now use this to great effect. Brilliant move here. Beautiful. What a cool move to play in a game. Queen takes g3 check. Now we're seeing the higher level tactics as we move through this video. Queen takes g3 check. You got to take back and now check. The point is black will win 2 rooks for the queen. Take. So game goes on. I would say I'll take black here any day because it's easier to move. I don't really care that the engine says 0-0. It's totally equal. It is easier to move for black. Therefore, the chance of going wrong is higher for white. I would take black here any day. And also, I play the Queen's Gambit accepted. It's very helpful to go through these kind of games to see how they play. Take. If you take with the e-pawn, queen b5 check could be annoying. No nonsense here. And now castle. Really interesting to castle. Well, that's totally different now. I mean, you've won the guy's rook. It's a bit weird to castle queenside. Bishop out. And now f6. You give up that pawn, but this pawn is not going anywhere. The 2 rooks really do control the board. After rook h8, it is so difficult for white to play a good move. Rook h2 check. You're going to pick up the queen. How do you even stop that? You don't. Knight c4 check. How useful is that? The knight just hops in. Do you remember that knight was placed here on move 4, just to show you. Here. You hit the pawn, you come into d5 I mean, and then you come back. That was played on move 5. And finally, the knight actually comes back into the game on move 24. Knight check. It's almost game over. Rook comes back. Now why? Because we can just target the queen. Not only that, we're picking up the bishop. That's pretty cool. Why has no counterplay? Take the bishop. And we can come in check. Really cool move here, by the way. If the queen moves here, checkmate in one move. Beautiful. Just using the pin. It's checkmate all of a sudden. Really strange one. Knight e3. All squares. All squares covered. Now going back 2 moves, in the actual game f4 was played, but we still get the same move. The same knight fork, winning the house. Knight e3 check, game over. So that was the 2300 game, and here we have it. The last game is between Praggnanandhaa, one of India's prodigies, versus Magnus Carlsen. This game took place in Tata Steel. So we do get the Queen's Gambit accepted, just in a little bit of a weird order. You might be thinking, what is he talking about? This isn't the accepted. We take it. Well, he's actually just going to take it on move 3. So it's a little bit different. e3, Prague chooses to be solid. You defend your center. Going to get it back. a6. Knight here. And we've seen this position before. Even the best player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, plays the Queen's Gambit accepted. Pawns here. a6. Light square control. b5 here. c5 coming up. That's exactly what Magnus did. So even though we are rising through the ranks, going from 1500 all the way up to Magnus's level 2865, the opening moves are still the same. c5. We can all play like Magnus up to move 6, and then we can see the difference in class coming up. b3, Prague chooses this option, which we also saw in the previous game. Move the pawn, the bishop can come out here, and it can also come out here. Bear this in mind. Very interesting moment, I think. b5 was possible, just to kick the bishop away. Then the bishop retreats, bishop here, maybe you go a4, hit the pawn chain, play in this fashion. However, not today. Magnus chooses to be solid, b6, just defend this pawn. Big decision in the opening, I think, b6. Bishop a3 played. How interesting is that? This is Prague's preparation, put pressure in the center. Now knight d7. He doesn't want to go for this capture. This is actually a really bad capture if Magnus played it. Take. And now you can't castle. White is much better here. So this is Prague's idea. So one option was to defend with the queen, but then later maybe a rook comes on the c file, attack the queen. Nope. You can go b5 now. I wonder if that's okay. And then maybe here. This looks very interesting. Just to play in this way. Knight here, game goes on. However, knight d7 played, which gives Prague this option to play d5, which is absolutely fascinating. Just to try to come through the center. Never seen this idea before. e5 is also fascinating. The engine gives +1, but that's due to the fact that white is a passed pawn already. If we keep playing on a little bit, here, knight here, you could play knight on the previous move. So here, this one, knight, bishop, here, castle. It says +1, but that's because of this guy. Maybe I was being a bit careless. Knight here, maybe drop the bishop back first. Yeah, I was just being careless. What am I talking about? Here, you just get forked. No. So going back 3 moves, in this position I was mentioning, maybe you retreat. Bishop here, typical move, classic move, just to block the pawn. Castle, e4, game goes on. Something like this. I mean, I take this. This looks very interesting. Bishop looks really well placed. I take black here. So fascinating middle game. However, Magnus take. Bishop looks incredible, but you don't really want to take it because now the queen comes in. The rook moves. And it's this brilliant move, in my opinion. Bishop here, stopping the guy moving his bishop. You may be thinking, well, what's the big deal? If black cannot get that bishop in the game, it's just so difficult to move. So, in this position, Magnus is feeling the heat, in my opinion. Feeling some pressure right now. You don't want to take the bishop, so rook moves. Bishop out and castle. So, Magnus has finally got his king safe. The game has just begun. Prague goes queen c2, typical move. Get space, now get off the file. Queens face each other. a4. Now Prague finally flicks this move in, which is a typical move because even though black has got space, you've got to find a way to chip away at that structure. a4 is a typical move in these kind of positions. Another option was just rook here, game goes on, maybe drop the bishop back. h6, it's a useful move, in my opinion, doesn't do anything. I bet there was another option. h6 bit with a weird move, to be honest. Pawns come off, queen e2, so Prague is attacking the structure now. Queen b6, doesn't want to go b4. Knight here. And if the queen moves then here, looks like we're finding a way. Prague has found a way to fix the structure. It's very, I mean, you can't move these. All of white's pieces are better placed anyway. Got the files here as well. So no. Magnus keeps attention at queen b6. If you don't know if you should move a pawn, don't. Because every pawn move is a weakness. With this move, you're giving your opponent the light squares. No. Keep the tension with queen b6. b4, rook e8, hit the queen, bishop back, and now b4. So Magnus is, well, he's just finding a way to probably swap a few pieces off. He doesn't have too much space. Queen f4 now, and b4, attack the knight. You attack the queen. Now let's throw in this in-between move. Knight takes d5, knight takes bishop is vital. You attack the queen, take back, and now the queen swings over to e6. Not only that, you attack this if the rook ever moves. Rook d1 played, blunder, allowing the rook to sidestep. And you might be thinking, what's he talking about? Why sidestep the rook? Rook d1. Okay, you get out of this tactical idea. Queen back, and now taking on e4. Brilliant move here was, what was it? It was a brilliant move here. Oh yeah, it was here, c4. Yeah. Double exclamation mark. You may be thinking, what's the idea? It's because the pawn used to defend a knight. Now you go here. A knight can't go anywhere. Absolutely brilliant move. I've never seen a tactic like this. You might be thinking, well, what's the big deal? Big deal. Knight comes in. Take. Finding a way out. Brilliant move here from black. Queen f6. Because if, so queens attack, if they come off, now every single thing hangs. The rook hangs, can't go back, knight hangs. Oh no, sorry, knight doesn't hang. What am I talking about? Let's remove that blue arrow. Doesn't hang because of this. This hangs. So everything's hanging. So what a brilliant tactic. So let's go back 3 moves. c4 was a brilliant move. It's coming up soon anyway. Rook here. Taking in the center. And now rook defends on the side. The reason I drew these arrows was because if take. If we consider this, look at the blue circles. It's really 2 rooks versus rook and knight, but these knights are doing nothing. And how can you prove, how can you show these 2 knights are doing nothing? You trade the rooks off. Black has total control of the central files. Take. Rook coming in. Game over. The 2 knights are offside. There's no time for this to come back in. And if you play this, it's about fighting to control d1, queen e2. Game over. The rook is just way too powerful. These 2 knights are just spectators. They're too far away from the action. So let's go back 3 moves here. Magnus is taking over. Defend from the side. Drop the queen back. Why did he drop the queen back? Because the queen defends this and then you're planning to win the rook, I see. Okay, so let's drop it back. Hit the queen back here. Now you can't do here. Ah, that's clever, very clever. Because the knight used to be here defending. You can't play this now because the rook hangs. I see. I see. Cool move. Nice. Nice rerouting there. So Prague's knight comes into f5, c4. Now we get this brilliant move. If take, you take here. Looks so dangerous, doesn't it? Even this, it looks so dangerous. But what does Magnus do? Just block the diagonal. Because even though you attack this, you attack a7. Now knight f6 attacks the rook as well, and the bishop. Here, everything looks like it's going to drop. It's not going well for Prague now. He is losing. Shut out that bishop. If you shut it out, then you're basically a bishop up. You take me, attacking the knight, but Magnus now takes in the center. And things are coming off in black's favor. Take, take. Everything's hanging. But black is going to be the one coming out on top. You take me, I take you. You can't even take because you get a queen. And perhaps that is something that Prague did not calculate all the way. Threatening to win, but you defend on the side. This knight is coming in. There's no good way to stop it. It's game over. So Prague resigned here, and this game took place in Tartar steel. If the knight retreats, well, you just keep the rook on the same file. You could go here. The engine actually gives this move, which is brilliant as well. Yeah, you just take, you just come back, and then you get a queen. That's very clean. Very clean. Or you just go here. I think that looks good as well, and then here and here. So that is how Prague lost to Magnus, and that's why we end with this. We went from 1500 all the way to 2865, Magnus's level, just to see the kind of positions, the kind of moves, the kind of tactics, setups that all these players at all these different levels were using. Let me know if you want to see another video like this. What opening do you want to see next? From chess beginner to chess master. Let me know in the comments below.